All right, so let's jump in with something that everyone here has experienced. What is it like to find a job? I mean, everyone here has been through that whole process. Mine somewhat differently, because I just, to hand in my application, was walking from one office to the other, and everyone else went through a completely different process. And whether you're now employing people or whether you're just recently employed, you've still gone through that process. So I'm going to hand over to my fellow moderator to give his insight, and then we're going to hand it to the panel.
Cool. So I guess nice way for me to start, and Sia, Jesse, Camilla, for both of you guys, all three of you guys that have been through the process recently, like me, I'd very much like to hear your inputs on this. But I went through, when I got my job, it was a process of probably going through close to 25 interviews before both realizing, because the thing is, what people don't realize is that you think you know what you want until you start interviewing, and then actually doing interviews is good from both the employer's perspective in retrospect, and from your perspective as well, in that the interviews is really much a case of as much of testing what you know as opposed to testing what sort of fit you'll be, what sort of skill sets they're expecting you to have, and kind of whether you actually, even if you think you like doing a certain thing, actually asking questions about the job, you might actually realize, for example, I really don't like doing subject X. I'm not good at it. I really just don't like it, that sort of thing. And only I feel like going through the interview process will you really realize what you like and what you don't like, and what's going to suit your skill set. In terms of the number of rounds of interviews I had to go through, most interview processes were under 2 rounds before we kind of concluded wherever we wanted to go. But yeah, Sia and Jesse and Camilla, how was your guys' experience? I think my number of interviews is a little bit ridiculous. I think I went through an insane number of interviews before I landed at the place that I'm at. Not for good or for bad reasons. It was just I never quite found the fit that I wanted. So it'd be interesting to hear your guys' thoughts.
Yeah, no. So I think if I could kind of add to what Chris is saying. So I think if we can kind of go to my emails, maybe during 2017, there's a whole lot of unsuccessful emails that are there. So I think for me it was really first of all psychologically training exercise. Looking for employment. Because again, as Chris was saying, you think you know what you want, and once you start attending maybe the first interview and they tell you about what it is that they do, then you're like, okay, maybe is this really what I want? But I think for me personally, I started out, kind of going through the different companies that I was interested in, which were, for me, were in banking, insurance companies, to kind of see what's on their career pages, and also kind of tapped into, these third-party sites such as your Indeed, PNet, to kind of see what opportunities they have there. And, it's just a matter of curating your CV, making your CV to be, very much aligned to that specific, I suppose, prospective job. And for me, it was just that iterative process. It was not very easy, but I think when the opportunity of, joining my current organization, ABSA, came, it actually came from not myself looking, but a friend referred it to me and said, hey, there's this opportunity, which really stressed out, I suppose, for me, the important factor as well of having, a circle of people that are, kind of helping, and you guys are helping each other in finding a job, because it can really be stressful. I don't think that there really is a manual in finding a job. If there was, I mean, probably 80% of us would be employed, but it's just a positive mindset. It's a positive attitude, and really, kind of putting your CV in places that you think you'd want to be with, and with a company that you think, kind of can be a mutually beneficial experience. But I will definitely say that one thing that stood out for me was there's a lot of, psychological, I suppose, factor that comes with looking for a job. And you need to be in the right space of mind to be able to say when that unsuccessful, workflow mailer or that automated mailer comes, it does no longer become a personal thing, but it's just one of those things, because at some point, it's just a matter of time. There will come a point whereby the right position for you comes, and it sort of will happen. I don't know what other guys' experiences were like.
I'd like to open it up to the panel and say, obviously different people have had different experiences, and from a long time ago in certain people's instances to very recently. So was it different for anyone else? What were you studying when you started applying? Paul, you're muted.
Apologies. I'll give my 5 cents perhaps, because I think it adds a bit to what Sia was saying there. And at the the things that resonated with me there was the psychological aspects and the automated emailers coming back. And I suppose now I've seen the other side of the coin, and it might be good to sort of give that side of the experience as well, so people understand what's going on perhaps in the back, so to speak. So firstly, 100% here, I think, if anybody thinks they're going to pop out one email and they're going to tell them they've got a job and it's going to be, start to end of the process is a month, you're making a massive mistake, and I thought that's the way it was, more or less. I think it's a long journey, and, don't start in November if you want to start working in January. Unfortunately, and it might be for some people like that. For most people, it's not the case. So that's my first insight there. Hundreds of emails and communications, and even the job you're eventually going to have, it's going to be 50 emails. And my personal views right now, the way I like to do interviews, is actually I do multiple interviews because of teams, especially. I don't have to take 3 hours of a candidate to drive through to the offices and then sit in the interview and then drive an hour back. I can take 30 minutes 6 or 7 times from that person and pull in multiple angles and multiple experts on different levels that I can test emotions and technical aspects or whatever I want from that candidate. So I think the game's completely changed in the last year because of COVID and things that we can do right now. I mean, in the past, I would have had to, take the afternoon off. Now I've been in a meeting just now and I'm popping into this and then I'm going back to work again, kind of a vibe. So that's sort of the first 2 things there. Then just a little bit of the process for me. I have found that in our field, no one really knows what we want. Me and HR is personally not great friends when it comes to recruiting, because I don't follow their processes, because I'm openly telling them they don't know what I'm looking for. I tell them, don't try and screen CVs, send me everything, because if you accidentally put on there that I want someone that codes in R, and this person can do absolutely everything except R, then the CV doesn't come through to me, And I've just found, and we all, I see people nodding, I found that the skills that we're looking for is often an ability to code in a couple of languages, an ability to manipulate data, and an ability to think of it, to be completely honest. And those things you can't just put on a CV spec to say this and that and whatever. The technology is not too wide. So often the HR person in most organizations will then back you out the door, and unfortunately you get a no. And as Sia said, don't see that as a big no. Unfortunately, it's a game of probability, and you have to play the game. You've got to increase your chances of success by throwing the dice more often. There you go. I'm gonna park it there.
Thanks, Paul. Anybody else want to add from either side? I know that Carmela, you've moved a bit. Mark, you've obviously seen a lot of CVs as well. Can you add to what Paul said?
So I think maybe it resonates to what Sia said as well as Paul. When you start applying for your job, you start learning how the world works in a totally different way, because when you've been studying, it's always been a one dimension. You go to your lectures, you go to your department, and you're in control of that. And then when you apply for a job and you realize that you met all the qualification requirements and maybe perfectly, but there are other factors that you need to think about. and maybe as you grow, and don't wait until you're finished studying. For example, people must be able to feel they can work with you. Qualifications alone are not important. So you must be relatable. But also one thing that you realize that I actually think to some extent getting a job requires to be lucky, because of all those factors. It's the moment someone has to feel like they can work with you, or you can fit somewhere else. The other part is normally what you want to do is not normally what you're going to do. You must prepare for that, because and I think maybe a lot of you experienced in your interviews where your manager asked you, so what if you start here? How do you feel about that? It's about, they used to tell me, why don't we just get into the system? Because once you're in there, you've got the skills and you're able to do that. But from what I'm seeing now today, we are struggling finding, data scientists who are human. We've got very many statisticians, we've got very many data scientists, but we don't want you to be a data scientist so that you can be a data scientist. We want you to have data science skills so that you can solve world problems. For example, you need to be able to be curious. For example, you need to demonstrate that while looking for work. You need to be able to demonstrate that you can connect to humanity, because the solutions you're coming up are solving human problems. You need to be able to be humble, because if you're not humble, how are you going to be patient and discover things? So all those attributes that are non-technical are the ones that help you integrate into other skills, as well as integrate and work with other people. So I think that's what I wanted to add to what the other panel members have said.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for very important. I want to just hand it over to the people that haven't had an opportunity to speak. Victoria, in particular, you've been, as you said, Volkswagen. I know Volkswagen. I don't know if you said it. So, and then into various different roles in research and academia. So, how did you experience the transition from those points of view? Because I see a lot of us, including Paul and Mark, we went from academia, well, some of us stayed, but we went from academia to industry. You kind of went the other way. How was that as an experience for you?
Yeah, so I was just thinking sort of back to applying for a first job, and I think I was incredibly lucky with, at Rhodes, we had a lot of graduate placement program, sort of organized business was coming to us initially on campus for a sort of initial, let's talk about the job, and across, not specific to the stats field, but across everything. And it gave us the opportunity as students to kind of learn what was out there. And then also for the companies, I think they could kind of, what Paul was saying, now it's quite easy to interview quite a lot of people. They were able to do that because they'd come to the campus, a few times, and you could get interviews quite easily with a whole number of different organizations, industries, etc. And then moving into that, when with Volkswagen, the graduate placement program that they had when I started was an incredible entry into industry, where we worked in a number of different departments. I worked in the marketing department, the research department. I worked on the production line for 3 weeks. And I think I probably learned more about the real world in those 3 weeks in my blue overalls on the production line, seeing where a car came from, literally from sheet metal. And yeah, so I think that kind of got me into it in an amazing way, and I was really, really fortunate to have that. And then moving around, also that, as Sia said, the sort of networking. Pretty much since then, every job I've moved into, I knew somebody who sort of let you know it was there. And it is a lot of luck, I think, and being in the right place at the right time. And also, I think there is that whole, what you think you're going to do and what you end up doing are two very, very different things. And a lot of it is just learning and growing, and you know, what you were doing 5 years ago is not what you would expect to be, you know, doing, or none of us saw what we'd be doing right now 2 years ago, never mind 5 years ago. So, and then just Warren, to sort of follow on from what you'd said of going back into academia, I think was a different transition of things move at a different pace. There's different, the sort of mentality and the psychology of the department and the interactions is all very, very different. And it's, you probably expect it to be how it was when you were a student, but given that that was quite a long time ago, things have changed. So yeah, it was a very different setting to be in. I think all of the others were sort of more in industry, quite very different, but there was a similarity, whereas academia is something different, and it has pros and cons, and you learn different things and you're given different challenges. You know, in the workplace, you're expected to do certain tasks and you have a boss sitting over you and you've got to deliver a report or whatever it is. In academia, you've got to try and get students to understand stuff, and you can say it once and twice and 5 times and it just might not work. And you almost have to learn to adapt more to, you know, certain aspects. Obviously, you're adapting in everything, but yeah, I certainly think experience, getting in, trying new things as well. And something that I thought of earlier was, I think I probably learned more about interviewing when I started interviewing people.
Yes.
That for me was a real eye-opener of when you sit on the other side, and as Sia said, you're sending all these letters, and then Paul said, yeah, and you're rejecting a whole lot. It is, and until you're actually on the other side, sitting, listening to an interview, I think that's something really valuable. And certainly for, you know, the younger ones in the audience, when you have that opportunity to actually sit in on interviews, you will actually learn an amazing amount about yourself, about other people. And yeah, I think things are always changing, but we're always learning as well. And things are very different now compared to what they used to be.
Thanks, Vicky. I'll touch on what you said. I mean, you don't really get to know what the process is like until you actually have been on both sides of it. And granted, my exposure has been academic only. There is still a lot to be learned from being on both sides of that particular, to be part of the discussions and to be part of the organizing and the shortlisting. You see a lot behind the curtain that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. So you learn a lot from that. So Carmela, you've had a exposure in a completely different country. How is that? Is it any different? Have you had the same kind of experiences?
I think for me, starting out was a little bit different because I had to look for an international company where the working language wasn't Norwegian.
Okay.
Because everybody here speaks English, but if the company's Norwegian, they want you to know Norwegian.
Okay.
So it was a little bit difficult in the beginning because there were places I could apply for, but I wouldn't get a job there because I don't speak the language. So that was a bit hard in the beginning, but again, with the applications, I had a lot of reject letters as well coming in. The process of applying was quite in depth. I had probably like 7-8 rounds with psychological tests. I had to do work tasks. I had to do a whole lot of stuff, and then like 3 or 4 interviews. And then after all of that, it then got down to the point where, okay, we have a few people left. We know you're all good enough, but now who can we work with? So like Mark was saying, how can you get along with someone? Are you going to fit in with our team? So that was also a really big part of the interview process that I found. And at all the companies that I had interviews with, it was always, are you going to get on with the people that currently work here? So that was a very big part of it.
Yeah, I think that it's also very difficult to tell in the amount of time you spend with people. I mean, you can interview people and you can spend an hour, 2 hours with them, but unless you're sitting, you don't know what they're like to work with on a day-to-day basis. So that's also a big challenge. Jessica, you haven't said anything, so I would love to hear your insights on the matter.
So my kind of getting hired process was a little different. I decided, the plan was always for me to go work in Cape Town, and then I decided, you know what, let me just see what jobs there are in PE, because my base is actuarial science, so obviously there's not many of those jobs in PE. And I sent my CV to a recruitment agency where I know the person there, and they sent it to this company. They thought they would like me, and the MD and I had like a 45-minute interview. He likes being very involved in the hiring process, and not a very technical interview, just kind of, you know, what are your goals, what do you like, and then started like a week later. So just basically one round, and I think, again, as you know, our view kind of is, you know, you can learn skills, but you can't learn, you know, having an entrepreneurial spirit and a questioning spirit, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of for us the most important thing, and I guess that's why he hired me without any tests or that sort of thing, is you know, what do you like as a person, because you can learn those skills. That's not the main part, and I think, you know, especially in this field, we need to be able to figure out what are the right questions to ask. You know, it doesn't help we can just, cool, we can build these models, but we don't know what we want the model's answer to be. So I think when people are interviewing someone in a stats role, that's really important to show. Can I actually ask the right question? Do I understand like what I'm building? So I think that kind of helped me in my interview process, if that makes sense.